welcome to episode 12 of the Rising Phoenix podcast. I'm your host, Chase Strasser. In today's episode, I'm joined by Aaron Smith. Aaron is a former Elon men's basketball player, but that just barely scratches the surface of his story and the amazing opportunities he has had since his time at Elon ended. It was great getting to sit down with Aaron and learn about his journey that's taken him from Raleigh to Elon to across the world and back. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hello everyone, I'm Chase Strasser. Today I'm joined by Elon men's basketball alum Aaron Smith. Aaron, thanks so much for joining me, and welcome to the Rising Phoenix podcast, episode 12.
Hey, thank you, Chase, for having me. I'm honored to be here.
As we were talking before I hit the record button, your journey is arguably the most interesting that we've had the pleasure of hearing about on this show, and I'm excited to dive in, learn more. And so let's start at the beginning of your connection with Elon. You're originally from the Raleigh area. When did Elon get on your radar and become a place you were set on attending?
Elon got on my radar early. I want to say junior year of high school. I had some former Cardinal Gibbons alumni that were current basketball players at Elon, so Monty Sanders and John Charlesworth. And they would come back to Cardinal Gibbons, throughout the year, scrimmage with us in the summer, coach us at team camp and different things. And so I got used to, hanging out with those guys, being around them and seeing their love for Elon, their love for basketball, and their love for Cardinal Gibbons. And so I wanted to kind of follow in their footsteps. I'm like, these guys came from my high school. So I started following Elon hoops, and they were pretty good at the time. They made that run to the conference championship, played against Davidson and Steph Curry. So I was like, yeah, I want to go to Elon too.
That's awesome. When did you start playing, and what about the sport were you attracted to that you wanted to play collegiately?
Man, I started basketball. What's funny is from the day I was born. I'm kidding you not. So I had a basketball goal on my crib. So they converted, my parents did, my dad's weight room into like a nursery for me. So my dad would come in, shoot hoops on the mini goal, and lift his weights, and I'm in the crib. So I start picking the ball up and, putting it through the net, trying to be like him. So I say basketball, as far as I can remember, has been, a part of my life. My parents are both huge basketball fans. My dad, he played in high school, Rocky Mount, North Carolina, so they're known for basketball as well. My mom attended the University of North Carolina when Michael Jordan was there. And so we just love basketball in our family.
When you came to Elon, it was as a preferred walk-on. What kind of challenges did that present during your freshman year, which is a time for a lot of students that you're not only getting acclimated to school, but you're also trying to make a team and get on that roster for the winter?
So coming in as a walk-on was an interesting process for me because I originally wanted to go to Elon University. Not even just for basketball, but for the communications program. And that's something that I was passionate about, that I wanted to study. But the coaching staff at the time, they were not interested in me. They really didn't want to have anything to do with me. They're like, we got another small guard here already. We really don't need you. They basically told me they didn't need me. But that coaching staff ended up getting fired. And Coach Matheny ended up getting hired and bringing in his own coaching staff. I already had a relationship with Justin Gainey, who was an assistant coach from when he was at North Carolina State. So we had been having some conversations previously. So I reached back out after the new coaching staff was hired, and the relationship was much different. They're like, well, we like your game. You're an excellent student. We think you could be an asset to our program. We just don't have any scholarships for you. And so I knew that going in, that they didn't have any scholarships for me, but they wanted me to be a part of the team. So what ended up happening was, that summer, well, not even summer yet, the spring following my senior year at Cardinal Gibbons, I started driving to Elon every day after school to play pickup with the current guys. And so I did that, all the way to school finish and then throughout the summer. So I went into coming to Elon with a good relationship with the coaching staff and with my future teammates. And so that was a huge plus. And so all the guys, I got along with them. They were really welcoming, and they were just helping me get better and challenging me and everything. And so I had good grades. So they knew that wasn't going to be a problem. Coach Matheny, I remember he was speaking to my parents. He's like, well, did he get accepted? And they're like, yeah, he got accepted academically. So that was huge. That's what he wanted. And so from then on, it was a smooth process. So when I got to campus, I did orientation just like everybody else, all the other students, and got acclimated to my schoolwork, but then just started joining conditioning and weightlifting and pickup and preseason workouts. And so when it became time for tryouts, I was ready. I was in great shape. I knew the program, so there was not a chance I felt like that anybody that was coming to walk on or try out was going to make it over me. I felt like I was the most prepared for that process.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Basketball wasn't your only focus. You came here as a strategic communication student. Before we get into that, I wanted to
No,
ask
you know
this.
what? I actually came as a corporate comm major. They got rid of my major after
Oh,
my freshman year.
really? Did it,
Yeah.
did they rename it like in the middle of when you were doing it?
Yeah, so I don't know if it was like after my freshman year that summer or something, but I definitely came in as like a corporate comm major, and they were like, "Well, we're changing things up," and then I became a strat comm major, which was interesting because I ended up having to take a lot of classes that I wasn't necessarily thought I was signing up for. Because with strat comm, you cover everything.
Oh, yeah.
You're in front of the camera, you're behind the camera, you're a journalist, you're a PR. You know what I mean. So
Hmm.
I came in thinking like I'm gonna be, I'm going corporate or whatever, and then I kind of learned kind of the ins and outs of the business as a whole, which
Yeah.
is cool.
Did that end up better preparing you? Like it wasn't something you were expecting, but once you started taking those different classes, I know I'm journalism, but strategic communications, you got to take like tourism and all these other different fields. Did that end up helping you down the line?
I think it definitely did. And then they gave you a chance to see what you like and what you don't like. And then I kind of gravitated more towards social media. I ended up really liking that aspect of it. Then I realized I didn't really like being in front of the camera as much as I thought I was going to. And I knew I definitely didn't like filming and directing and editing and things like that. So I definitely like to write more, much more of a writer, much more of a social media, kind of guy. So yeah, I thought it was awesome. I had a great experience. I had great professors. Loved all my classes. I did. What's funny is I do well in all of the classes that I really like or that I'm interested in, and not so much in some of the other ones. But like all my major classes, I did pretty well in. So, so I did something right.
I was gonna ask, when was the last time you've been to Elon's campus? Because you mentioned the pickup games. I assume those were either in alumni, but have you seen Shar Center
You know
recently?
what? So I came back and worked camp a few summers after I graduated. And then I came back to campus for a few games. And then I actually came back for homecoming this past year because it was my 10 year. I'm a class of 2013. So I was just on campus, back in November. Yeah, so campus looks a lot different from when I was here. I played in alumni, super jealous of the Shark Center, super jealous of the practice facilities and all of the things those guys have, but super happy, for everybody on campus and the basketball program with how things have come along. But yeah, my days we were back in alumni and we were going to Jordan Gym for practices sometimes, and even East Gym, which was hot and had no AC, and we would have to share it with the softball team every once in a while. So I know that's not happening anymore.
Just a couple changes on campus.
Yeah.
Well, I did want to ask about the academic side of things. We touched on that. It was a huge part of your life and as your career, as we'll discuss. But after Elon, you continued your academic pursuits at Duke, and then you went across the pond to London. We'll talk about that. But first off, what attracted you at Duke, and what did you accomplish while you were there?
Okay. Yeah. Definitely. So I grew up a North Carolina Tar Heel fan, and I never thought
So that was a switch.
that was a switch going to Durham and going to that campus. But I've always respected Duke as a higher education institution. So basketball aside, we won't talk about that. But I was in a situation where I was like you touched on. I was supposed to be going overseas to the University of East London to do my master's on a basketball scholarship, and I had a health scare. I was hospitalized with the blood clot. So that set me back, and I was not going to be able to attend East London that fall of 2014. And so while I was at home, I didn't want to just be wasting time while I'm, recovering my health and recuperating, to get back playing and all that kind of stuff. So I saw that Duke had the technical communications certification. And that was a program where I was able to go. It's like a continuing ed program, and you finish with a certificate. So I would go over to Duke. I was working at the time. I would get off of work and go to evening classes there to complete my certification in technical communications because I just never knew. I thought it would be something good for me to have, and I got a lot of skills and things that were transferable to different jobs and different things I've been able to use in the future. But that was, that was never even really planned out, but it was an awesome experience.
What did the timeline look like from where you wrapped up your Elon career to the hospital scare, to
Yeah.
finding out that you weren't going to be able to go to East London just yet?
Yeah, so graduated spring of 2013, had my health scare in the summer of 2013, and then enrolled in Duke that fall of 2013. Wrapped up that program in the spring of 2014. So got that done, and then still had another summer that I was able to train and get ready to go over to East London. And I started at East London in the fall of 2014.
And it wasn't your first time traveling. You got the opportunity to travel while you were with the men's basketball team to a couple different places. What about traveling? Was it just the fact that you were going to be able to continue to play basketball in London, or was there also that appeal of going to a different country? And did you ever think you would end up in London?
You know what? That's a great question. So I visited London for the first time in 2010 with my mother. Spring break. Most kids go to like the beach or something. My mom was like, "Well, let's go to London." All right, so we went to London. And I ended up really liking it. It was just I don't know what it was. It could be because I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, and so the accents or something. But yeah, it felt like home. You'll hear this from me a couple of times. I'm sure like different places that I lived that have felt like home. But instantly, I really really liked the place, and so that was my first taste of it. But at that time, I never thought I would live there. I didn't know anything about it. But like you said, we ended up in between my sophomore and junior year doing like a study abroad for the basketball team where we did our Europe trip, and then we went to Italy, Austria, and Germany. And then throughout that process, we're doing our schoolwork and we're learning about the areas, and we're also playing basketball. We're competing, so we're competing against professional teams over there. And this is kind of a situation because as walk-ons, you don't really get to play a lot when the season comes. But since we were on this trip, I get thrown into some games and things like that because they don't really count for anything. So I was getting some experience, some playing time, and I'm like, I can hang like with these guys over here, these guys in Italy, Germany, you know what I mean? So I felt like, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking I can hang. So that kind of, I think built those seeds in my brain that when I graduated, that I could possibly do something overseas with basketball. And then it happened to just be East London. I'm telling you, this is the end of my college career. My mom sent me an email. She emailed it to me. It was the application for the scholarship to East London. And I just filled it out on a whim, sent it off. Didn't even really think too much about it, but they were really eager and got back to me. They were like, "We really like your background." I had played enough as a walk on that I had some highlights that I can make like a 3-4 minute highlight video, getting in garbage time and stuff, and I'm doing my thing. And they liked what they saw, and they were like, "We want to bring you on." And it was cool because they also made me the head international sports ambassador. So on top of playing for the basketball team, doing my masters, I was pretty much required to promote sport for the university, which served me well in my later careers, which was really cool. So we would do different events, 3-on-3 tournaments. I would host volleyball tournaments, soccer tournaments, just anything to get the student body as a whole involved with athletics and get them to come out to different games and cheer people on. So I really took that as a badge of honor for them to, make me that. And that was really cool.
I know personally, I got the opportunity to do a January trip to London this past January. I gotta go when it's warmer. I think that was the one thing where it was an awesome experience. It was a little too cold.
Too cold for you. You know, I picked some of the coldest places to live, man. I lived in London, and we'll talk about China later. But I lived in northeastern China, so yeah, we could talk about cold.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, before we get to China, sticking with London, like you mentioned, you coached, you played, you learned, you were ambassador. How did one, you were able to put it all together, but how did you balance all that, especially in a new country?
Right. Looking back on it, I like think about it, and I'm like, man, you were like a little bit crazy to take on all that that I took on. But I really wanted to maximize my time there because I was just there a little over 2 years, and the opportunity presented itself to me because in the UK there's multiple teams for each sport. So you'll have like your head teams, like your first, second, third, fourth. Some schools even go up to fifth, depending on the sport. And so I played on the first team, and my head coach was like, "Aaron, you got a great mind for the game. How would you like to coach our men's second team?" I was like, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I have time, but I'll give it a shot. And so I gave it a try, and I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed coaching. And I had a great group of guys that were playing for me. And at the same time, I also worked on the school campus in the contact center as a international contact agent, which served me well later in my career. Now that I'm in higher ed, but I'm reaching out to students overseas for the university. And then I ended up doing a full-time internship in the summer there in the communications department. And then I also played professionally basketball at the same time. And so I was just very busy. I didn't have a lot of downtime. There wasn't a lot of hanging out. People always ask me, well, when you were there, did you go to France? Did you go there? I'm like, no, I had no time. I worked and I was in the gym. So I was either working, playing, or coaching, and I loved it. And it was awesome. I think it prepared me for the rest of my life so much because I ended up doing everything that I did there and learning and growing. And I ended up doing it later in a different capacities, throughout my career so far. So, but yeah, just time management. You have deadlines for everything, and you have a schedule for everything, and so just making sure you're organized. Making sure that you're not late for anything, and you're able to get everything you need to get done. And I did, and it was awesome.
Well, after 2 years in London, you decided to move once again, this time to China. Again, you coached, you did a couple other things, you even taught English a little bit. What, talk about that experience in China? What led you there from London? And then what, throughout all of this, I was just curious, what motivated you to keep you coaching, to keep you teaching younger athletes and the traveling as well?
Right. And so, like you said, I love to travel. I love um, learning about new cultures and meeting people from other cultures and things like that. So that's what kind of motivated me to travel. I just love it. And the opportunity in Beijing came about. I was finishing up in London, and my student visa ran out. So I had to make a choice. Was I gonna move back home to the U.S. or go somewhere else? And at the time, I didn't have a job lined up back in the States. So the option was like, you've been living abroad doing all this stuff. The option was like to go move back home with mom. And I was like, I'm not trying to do that really. And so this opportunity came about. I applied for a head coaching position with a youth academy in Beijing, Show One Sports. And I met the hiring manager, and it was an American guy, happened to be a Duke fan too. I didn't hold it against him. John Calberg, good guy. And we just got to talking, and I was asking him about his life in China, and he was telling me, they love basketball. The cost of living is very good. There's a lot of opportunity for you to get involved with a lot of different things, and it sounded awesome to me. But I was a little nervous. I had never been to Asia before. I had never been to China. I didn't speak the language, and I didn't know anybody there. And so I made this decision, to just go give it a try. And I ended up 2016 moving to Beijing and ended up loving it in China. And it was awesome coaching the kids. And um, Yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
And if that wasn't enough, that is, like you mentioned, only about 2016, 2017. In 2017, we'll start with that. You co-founded a new company at the time as well, to continue your work. What was that company about? What was the mission? And how is, even though we'll get into it, the pandemic kind of sidelined things, how is that experience in trying to start a company and its mission? What have you carried with you from that process?
Yeah, so that was an idea that a buddy of mine, shout out to Jack Anton, that he came up with the idea back when we were in grad school. So take it from the beginning. When it was time for me to go over to the University of East London, I'm sure you know there's a lot of paperwork involved. There's visa paperwork, and everything's different because it's in a foreign country. It's not the same as going to school in the U.S. But at the time, this is 2013, 2014. I didn't know anything about that process. And so I would get a piece of paperwork done and I'd send it to Jack. Jack could get a piece of paperwork done, he'd send it to me. And so we're just going back and forth, getting everything in order to get our visas to go over there. And he's from Florida and he went over on a tennis scholarship. And so we were just sitting around one day and he's like, man, we could do this. I'm like, Jack, do what? And he's like, we could start our own company. We can send these kids overseas and do exactly what we did and help them through the process. And I laughed it off. I'm like, yeah, sure, Jack, cool, whatever. Didn't think much about it, but then was in a position to where not only was I coaching, but I was playing in China at the time. I ruptured my Achilles at the end of 2016. So I flew back to the US to have surgery. So I'm going to be out for an indefinite period of time, rehabbing, getting myself back together. So I'm at home and I'm rehabbing, and just me, I can't have any downtime. I got to be doing something. So while I'm in this process where I'm relearning how to walk and then go to PT and learn how to run again, I call up Jack. I'm like, "What are you doing, man? What's going on?" And he was doing his thing, nothing he really loved at the time, and he was like, "Well, let's do that idea." And so we started our company. It's called Recruit Sport, and we had a good run, and it was awesome. And what we did was we found athletic scholarships for senior students, NCAA students, and we sent them overseas, to get their masters as well, just like we did. And we'll facilitate that whole process. Walk them through, find their needs, figure out what they want to do, find a school for them, and then help them locate a scholarship. And it would end up being nice because we had partnerships with a lot of universities, so we could charge a fee to the students, for placing them, and then get a commission on the back end from the university for supplying them with the athletes. And so we did that business, like you said, for about 3 years until the pandemic happened and the world kind of stood still, and I got into something else and he got into something else. But at the same time, that was an awesome experience with one of my best friends, being able to start something so special and also being able to help, 20, 30 plus athletes live out their dream. And in some cases, get those guys, got men and women, full rides in their respective sports to some of the best universities, in the world. Had a guy go get his master's in business from Durham University in the UK. So that's priceless.
That's amazing. Talking about when the pandemic hit, you were in China at the time. It was, a little bit of a process, it sounds like, to get
Right.
back home afterwards, because your current home country at the time was kind of at the center of everything, of this confusion when no one really knew whether you could get through the air, whether you get through touch. And, the world is just kind of in this lull. What was that whole journey? I keep asking, what was that journey like? But what was that specific era like where you found kind of new home with China? This
Right.
thing comes out of nowhere and you're almost at the center of it and you're just trying to get back home.
Right. So that was crazy because after I rehabbed and was able to go back to China, I went to a different city. I went to Chongqing. Then I was director of basketball operations and player development for a youth academy. We had kids ages 4 to 17, and I consider that my home for a while because I was there from the end of 2017 until the pandemic happened. And so I was in the same city and I was in the same apartment and I was pretty comfortable. I had a tutor. I started to learn Mandarin. I was teaching English on the side. I had pretty much had a life there. A buddy of mine, Mike Reynolds, one of my best friends from Cardinal Gibbons, he came and coached with me and lived in China for about 9 months. And so I considered Chongqing my home for a while. I had no plans of leaving Chongqing or leaving China. Um, in the near future, I didn't see, myself leaving China. And then the pandemic did happen. And so the thing about it was I had flown home for Christmas at the end of 2019 to help my mom with she had rotator cuff surgery. So I'm helping my mom come home. And then I fly back in January of 2020. When I got back to China, um, everything was normal for a couple weeks. And then you started getting the news out of Wuhan, people in the South. I was in the Northeast. So you start hearing stories about some of the provinces in the South and people getting really sick. And you start seeing it on the news, the way it's spreading. But everything in Chongqing, Jilin province, where I was, very close to Russia, very cold, everything was still, running as normal. But you kept seeing it start creeping up, creeping up, creeping up. And I want to say by the end of January, we were pretty much shut down. Gyms were closed, schools were closed, everything was closed except for the grocery store. So the only thing you could do was go to the grocery store, and they had like a block of time where they were open that you could get in. So maybe it was like 9 a.m. to noon, and that was it. Nothing else was open. And you go back to your apartment complex, and they're there like disinfecting you, like spraying you down with stuff before you can, return into your dwelling. And so at that point, it hadn't really reached the U.S. yet, and it wasn't like everything was, normal in the U.S. still. But everybody in the U.S. was watching the news with what was going on in China, and they were worried about me. So they were like, I got my mom calling me. I have it was my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now. We just got married in February, so shout out to Danielle. And so she's worried. She's like, "You're gonna get stuck in China," all this kind of stuff. So I just keep the weeks, start passing by, and then basically I hadn't been working, and so I'm really just sitting in my apartment. I had a buddy of mine, MD. He was an American guy. He was there, so I go to his apartment and hang out. But that was literally it. I could go to MD's house, I could go to the grocery store, and I could go to my apartment. And so after weeks of doing that, President Trump, I think it was Trump at the time, he canceled all the flights from China to the US. So at this point, it's getting like really kind of scary. Like you have to make a decision. I knew it was like either you're gonna have to stay in China, you don't know when you will be able to leave, or you can pack up and go home. And so after talking with my family and everything, I made the decision to just leave my life in China behind, because not knowing what was going to happen with the pandemic, and kind of luckily that I did, or else I wouldn't have been able to get out. But at the time, like I was telling you, there was no flights to the U.S. So I had a couple of options. I could have gone to Hong Kong, South Korea, and there was like a few other places. Some of them might have been way too expensive. So I settled on South Korea. I packed up all of my things in my apartment that I can take. Ended up leaving some stuff behind. All my favorite stuff, all my favorite clothes and shoes and things like that, packed up. Flew to South Korea. From South Korea, I was able to get a flight to Atlanta, from Atlanta to Raleigh, and home. And I'm back in the U.S. at the end of February 2020. No job, no unemployment, back at home. Like, what am I going to do now?
It was a little bit of a full circle moment, uh, coming back all the way to Raleigh. This time, not under the best of circumstances, but you were able to eventually reconnect with your old high school and continue your passions. Eventually, you made the leap to higher education, but talk about that time, uh, kind of in the height of the pandemic, to where you're able to connect with your old high school and get back to what you love.
Yeah, so it was really a really tough time. I know for everyone it was. And so I was trying to figure it out. And luckily I was able to, I had a great relationship with my high school, Cardinal Gibbons, very involved in the Alumni Association. So shout out to them. And just very involved with the basketball program as well, because I had a buddy of mine was head coach at the time, Brett Nolan. So what I did was I got on as a substitute teacher, basically. So I substitute taught, and then a teammate of mine, Ryan Winters, his brother runs an AAU organization called Pro Skills Basketball, and they had Pro Skills in Raleigh. So I took on a head coaching job for AAU kids for basketball at the time. So until I could, figure out my next career move, I substitute taught and I coached AAU basketball. And thanks to some connections and knowing them, that I was able to kind of just make it through that transitional period. But during that time, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, because I knew going back to China wasn't an option. So I kind of had to find my path. But I had that experience in higher ed from the University of East London. I had the experience in higher ed through Recruit Sport, the company that we started. And so it seemed like, and my communications degree. So it seemed like a logical transition for me to kind of get into higher ed. So that's what I did. I just started applying to higher ed jobs in the US. And one particular role stood out to me. I became the assistant director of Parent and Family Association at Hartwick College, where I'm at now. And it was just a role to kind of get myself in the door in higher ed and figure out the lay of the land and see what I like. And through that process, I ended up getting a job towards the end of 2020 and then relocated to upstate New York, to Oneonta, New York in January of 2021. And been in higher ed ever since.
You sort of mentioned it, but through all of this, there's that common thread of mentorship, coaching, teaching, education. What is so important about those things to you, and why is that such a passion for you?
Yeah. So I come from a family of educators, aunts, uncles, things like that, who've been in the education system for so long. And then my parents both graduated from college. My mom graduated from University of North Carolina, and then my dad graduated from the University of Maryland. I actually had the opportunity, in which a lot of kids don't, to attend my father's graduation for his bachelor's. So he got his bachelor's at 40. He had me when he was 30, so I was 10 years old. So I got to be there and see that. And my parents both instilled in me the importance of education from a young age, especially for Black people in this country. It's already hard enough, and I couldn't imagine trying to do it being uneducated as well. And so it's always been super important for me. I have multiple degrees, so I found it very important. And then obviously found it important to try to, for the next generation, to make sure that they're doing it too, because there's just so many opportunities that you can get, like to travel and to see the world and just, become a more well-rounded person. And not to mention your earning potential, increases. There's this huge attack on higher ed right now. And it's funny because I work in higher ed. Where you don't need it, but the studies will disagree with that. That it's important, and I believe in it, and I always have, and so I'll continue to fight for higher education and for our young people. And I do that now. Where I'm at Hartwick, I'm back at Hartwick College again. I'm a SOAR mentor, so there's a number of students that I do mentor, and I still work closely with the basketball programs and things like that. We can talk about a little bit later, but yeah, I think education is super important.
Yeah, tying into your connection with the sport of basketball, but also all these students across the years that you've been able to work with. What has been special about that connection, and how is basketball? You mentioned you're still tied into the sport while you're at Hartwick. Throughout your careers, why is that the sport that's always stuck out to you? I know you said you were born playing the game, and just those relationships with students. What has stuck out to you about those?
Because sports brings people together. It doesn't matter, you know, your gender, your race, or anything like that, or whatever, even what language you speak, right? So from a young age, I played all sports. I played soccer, football, baseball, and basketball. My dad will tell you I'm a fool because baseball was easily my best sport. It's funny that one of the former ECU coaches, Billy Godwin, he was my next door neighbor in Rocky Mount, and he would pitch to me, and I would hit. I was like 3 or 4. He's like, "Yeah, this kid, like he's special. Like he shouldn't be hitting the ball like this." And I was really good. I hated it. Like my dad made me play all the way up to almost high school, and I just did not like it. But it was my best sport, and I played football too. Once the hits started hurting, I quit. I played football till about 8th grade. I was decent at it, but once the tackles started hurting, I'm like, I'm good. I'm not. This is not fun anymore. And so basketball was not the sport that I was best at. It was my favorite sport. It was my favorite sport to watch growing up. I love Allen Iverson. I love Michael Jordan, and so I gravitated towards it. And I'm not tall, don't jump high, and I'm pretty quick, but I'm not that fast. So like all the skills for me, like it's like I picked a sport that I like had no business picking, but I just loved it. It was like, why would you pick basketball? But I just loved it, and it's just brought me together with people, and I just love to see it because I trained a kid in Beijing. I trained a kid in Chongqing, and I trained him for about 3 years, and his goal was just to play college basketball. And in China, you have to take a test. It's a basketball test to make the team. It's not like, oh, we just like you. You just get to be on the team. You actually have to take a test. So you need to make a certain number of threes from this spot, a certain number of free throws from this spot, left hand layups, right hand layups. So we worked on this test, among other things. I wanted to make him a well-rounded player, but I also wanted him to be able to pass his test when he got to college in Beijing, and he did. And so I worked with him up until the pandemic, and then the next year he went on to college in Beijing and made the basketball team there. And that was his dream. But I remember being a kid with that same dream. All I wanted to do was play Division I. I had no dream of playing in the NBA ever, never crossed my mind. I had no dream of playing overseas like I did. I just wanted to play Division I basketball. And I did it by being a good student and just working as hard as I could. And I know that other people could fulfill their dreams if they did the same thing, but a lot of people don't know how to do it or don't know the steps it takes. So I feel like it's on me to pay it forward to the next generation, whether they just want to go to school for academics or they want to go to school and play a sport or play basketball. I just happen to do it, through basketball more so because that's what I know the most.
Well, as we start to wrap up here, I think we could talk for quite a while about all your different jobs and just your career over the years. But as we've gone down memory lane, what is it might be hard to, but what has been your biggest takeaway or lesson from your journey that you have taken from all the different things all over the world?
Being a good person goes a long way, and having good intentions. I think that'll take you a long way. I try to be positive at all times. I try not to be negative, and I just try to be someone that other people enjoy being around, and then just try to help people, help others as much as you can. And I think that's why we're all here. I try not to try to be selfless, I guess you could say in a sense, and pay it forward because we've all gotten to where we are because of the help of other people. Nobody gets to anywhere alone, whether it's my parents, whether it's my coaches at a different level, professors, mentors. And so I just want to be that for other people. And I think you just got to keep that in mind throughout your journey. And doing that, being positive, being a good person, putting God first, and staying out of trouble, it'll take you a long way. It'll take you places you never thought you'd go. And like me, I've been and lived around the world and been places that I never even heard of that I never thought that I would get the opportunity to, and it's been amazing. And I just want other people to do half of what I've done, and I think they'll be happy.
Well, I was gonna mention at some point, but I don't think your LinkedIn it covers everything. I think you severely need to, I mean, just the things that you brought up and you're like, "Oh yeah, I also did that." It's just awesome and I've had a great time talking with you. I do have to ask and you probably are don't have an answer, but do you have a favorite place or a favorite time over these years? And this is an Elon podcast, so
Favorite place, man, that's a tough one. That's so tough. Gosh, you know what? I'm gonna pick this one for a number of reasons, and um, It's going to be London. I'm going to have to say London because I feel like I did the most growth there. And I played basketball professionally there, which was like amazing. And I got engaged there in 2023. So I took a trip with my wife, now wife, for her 30th birthday to London, and we got engaged by Tower Bridge, and that's one of my favorite places. And so that place means a lot to me. So a lot of close seconds, but definitely
I
London.
think that's a pretty good reason. Well, Aaron, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. One of these times when you're back at Elon, we'll have to get you in person, but I really appreciate you doing this over Zoom and hopping on the podcast. This has been awesome.
It's been great, man. Thanks for having me. When I'm back home and stop by campus, we'll definitely have to meet in person.
Yeah. And also, congratulations on the wedding. And I just wish you more success. I'm excited to see if this is what the last couple years have looked like. I'm excited to see what the next couple look like for you.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you to Aaron for joining me on this episode of the Rising Phoenix podcast. If you have not already, make sure to subscribe, follow, and like wherever you get your podcast. We now have a dozen episodes available, so we have plenty of content for you to enjoy. If you are an Elon athlete, coach, or alumni interested in being featured in a future episode of the Rising Phoenix podcast, contact Chase Strasser at cstrawser@elon.edu. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media channels. We're on Twitter or X at EU Rising Phoenix and on Instagram at Elon Rising Phoenix. We're also on TikTok at Elon Rising Phoenix. New articles, graphics, and other content can be found on any of these platforms for you to enjoy. Finally, new episodes of the podcast are coming out all of the time, so check back in every few weeks for a brand new episode with an exciting guest. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Rising Phoenix podcast.